Hey there, and welcome to the Jeffrey Van Dyke Show, a podcast for paradigm changers. Each week I speak with another influential leader who's changing the conversation for their audience, their industry, and this world. I am so glad you're here. Welcome to the show. All right, welcome to the Jeffrey Van Dyke Show, where we connect with people who are changing the conversation in this world, who are pushing the envelope in their industry for their audience, and ultimately helping us live a new conversation collectively. Today, we have with us Gevin Fax. Hey, Gevin!
Hey, how are you?
Good. And for those of you listening, Gevin is out on her motorcycle, out in nature, and it's looking beautiful out there. You may hear a little background noise. But yep. Gevin's an all-around badass with a huge heart. And I'll share just a little bit about you, Gevin, and then we'll dive in.
Okay.
So Gevin landed a principal role in a Turner Broadcasting documentary called Biker Women, where she rode her motorcycle across the country, sang in several shows along the way. It aired on TBS, Lifetime, Learning Channel, Discovery Channel. You've been on CoverGirl,
Yep.
appeared in Rolling Stone, People, Time, other magazines across Europe. You have a great passion for playing music and riding your bike. And if there's two things that Gevin Fax does, it's playing music and riding her bike. But you're more than that. And you really are a woman on a mission. And that's really what we want to dive into today. I know you have a Bachelor of Arts in Education and Psychology, a Master's in Education. And from everything I've learned about you, just a deep, deep love for people.
Absolutely.
And so welcome. Super glad to have you here.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, good. So I shared a little earlier that our audience are people who want to change the conversation in this world. They are messengers. And I think there's a lot of different ways to be a messenger, right? There's the obvious way, which is I'm a writer. Here are my books that I've authored, or I'm a filmmaker. Here's the films I've made, or some really obvious way, or I'm a musician. Here's my songs. Here's my music. But when I thought about you, the more I considered it, the more I thought, gosh, your life is the message.
Wow, I've never heard it put that way, but that's probably very accurate. Thank you.
You know, like one of the things I always say to my audience, that when we really do our life's work, the ultimate goal in our leadership is to be the living embodiment of our brand's promise. Meaning that who we walk through the world as and the messages we share match. You know, they're the same thing. What I get from you when you're on stage or on your bike and what I get from you when you're backstage is the same person. You know, and that to me is somebody living their message. So, you know, the more I looked into your experience and looked at some of the films you've been in and so forth, the more I got curious about what you would say your message is or your mission is. Like, what do you feel like you're up to in the world, Gevin?
You know, honestly, I had to really sit down and think about that myself, because quite often people are working to put you in a box. And what I learned from just living my life is I'm kind of a hard one to put in a box, simply because I move about the planet as much as I can. And I want to dive into everything because I just love life and I love engaging with people. And so I had to think very deeply about, well, what kind of phrase would that be if I needed a catchphrase, you know? And I kind of came up with Live Your Dare, because everything that I've done has been a dare for me. You know, I mean, when I was growing up, you know, I started performing very, very young, professionally at the age of 13. And I dared to try something. You know, I dared to go and perform at a ski slope in a lodge when I was 13 years old, and I ended up landing my first professional job there, and of course I was scared to death because the owner came over and he's like, I'd really like to hire you. He had no idea how old I was. And I said, that sounds great,
Yeah.
And so then I proceeded to talk to him about it. It's like, well, how old are you? And I go, well, I'm 13. And he goes, I said, is that a problem? He goes, no, not at all. You'll just have to have your parents sign off and say that it's okay that you're here performing in the lodge, in the lounge, and that you're not drinking because you're under 20, the whole 9 yards. So that was actually the beginning of everything, for me. It's just everything in my life has just kind of begun with a dare, just like motorcycle riding, I dare you to ride that bike. You're a girl, you can't do it. It's like, well, let's watch me, So I've learned to be faithful in taking a leap without a net quite often, and I don't, I grew up in a lower middle class family, so we didn't have a whole lot of money, with a lot of hand-me-down bicycles, hand-me-down clothes, but my parents worked very, very hard to make sure that we had exposure to anything and everything that all children would have exposure to, especially kids that were privileged, kids that were privileged, because we were not in that privileged group, and my parents were very adamant about making sure that they opened a way for my brothers and I, because I'm the only girl, to have access to that. And so they exposed us to things, even though, for example, downhill skiing, my father and my mother saved up the money to take us all skiing. It's an expensive sport, so that was it's an expensive sport. Yes. So my dad and my mom took us there. I learned to ski, and from that point forward, I ended up becoming a ski instructor and a safety patrol, and then I started competing. And it was the same thing with motorcycles. My father and my mom took my brother and I to a little mini bike place, and here you go, try it out, and I got in it, and then my little brother was so shy, he really didn't want to do much more, but I was like having a great time, hook sliding and diving off the jumps and everything. And Dad's like, well, there's a race going on over there. I'm like, yeah, but Dad, it's all boys. And he goes, that's never stopped you before. And I went ahead and he told me what to do. He said, whatever you do, he says, just make sure you keep the inside circle. I'm like, huh? He goes, keep the inside circle. Don't let him take the inside circle. Whatever you do, and just wrap it out, just twist that throttle and don't be afraid, and let that back tire slide around a little bit and keep your foot in the dirt if you need to, and just get out of there. I'm like, okay, I won my race. So it's stuff like that. Whether it's music, whether it's acting, even an acting, oh, you can't be an actress. Everybody wants to be an actress. There's only, 1% of all the people that go into acting that are ever, well, okay, but I still do it, and I've had feast and famine. Like 1 year I make a lot of money, the next year I make nothing, which brings me to the reason why I made sure I had a college education. It was like, I do not want to be a starving artist. There's no way. I do not want to be a starving artist.
Yeah. That's awesome. One of the things I look at a lot with my clients is how our core wounds influence our life's training and how it influences our mission. What's amazing hearing about your story is, so many of us, a lot of our wounds are related to our mom and dad. And, I don't know your parents, but to have your father champion you that way and have your parents open up doorways and avenues for you to experience more and to lean into it, especially for a girl.
Yes.
A lot of times parents, they kind of coddle the girls, and the boys, they tell them to go out there and do it.
Right.
And here's your dad. Hey, don't let him take the inside circle. That's brilliant. That's so awesome.
I actually have to attribute everything to my parents. My parents were very, very forward-thinking, progressive people. And in doing that, they instilled, I think they had more issues with holding me back from doing things than pushing me out there, because it's like, whoa, wait, because I was like, let me just get out there, so for me, and as you can see, I'm so hyper. I'm over 60, but I have all this energy that I am like, I just have all of this to put out there, and I need to do something with it. So
yeah. So tell me about that, because a lot of folks I work with, I think, have that experience of like, there's so much in me, that I want to express, that I want to get out, right?
Yes.
And I'm a singer, but I'm a biker, but I'm a this, but I'm a that. Like, how have you know? And so often they're trying to find one thing where it all fits. And sometimes that happens, right? Sometimes we can
Yes.
find an umbrella where the whole thing makes sense. But sometimes, you know, my perception of you is that you haven't sought to find like the one thing where it all fits, but instead that you just go, oh, that? Sure. Oh, that? Okay. Oh, that sounds fun. I'll go there. Is that accurate?
That is completely accurate. I'm one of those people that's like, okay, let me get all of this stuff and fit it into one thing. You know, everything that encompasses what I love. And truthfully, I think they didn't diagnose it when I was a child because there was no such thing, but I think I'm ADD, you know, because it's like I take interest in something and I do my best to master it. And then once I've mastered it, I'll stay in it for a while as long as it interests me. And then I'm ready to, it's like, oh, that looks interesting over there, you know, or let me try that out, you know. So for me, I'm just all over the place. I just like it all. If it's extreme sports, I'll be doing it one way, or if you give me the opportunity, I will definitely take the leap.
Yeah, beautiful, good. I want to talk about the Litas.
Yes.
So can you tell us what the Litas is and just describe the organization and your role in it?
Thank you so much. I would love to. I want to preface it with this. I am not the founder of the Litas. A lovely young woman by the name of Jessica Haggett founded the Litas. She just recently got married and now her last name is Wise. And she is the one that has championed this empire. And what they are is a collective community of women that ride. And it all started with her and a couple of girlfriends in Utah. And they thought, you know, we really would love to ride with more girls, you know, and how do we do that? And of course, Instagram was demonstrative in all of that. And they were new and they thought, well, you know, let's just put it out there. You know, hey, any girls want to go for a camp out with us or go for a ride with us? And to make a long story short, it went from there within 2 years to 62 countries and 262 cities.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And it is still growing exponentially. I would say that we probably have well over 15,000 members worldwide now. I mean, we've got Litas in Dubai, we've got Litas in New Zealand, we've got Litas in London, we've got Litas in Japan, we've got Litas in, I mean, every portion of the world that you can imagine, and all over the United States. Yeah. And they just keep popping up. So the beauty of that is having a community that we are all linked together because we're calling ourselves the Litas. And if I call the girls the Litas in Dubai and I go, hey ladies, I'm going to be in Dubai. I don't know anything about Dubai. Can you show me around? They're like, oh my gosh, yes, you know, let's do it. And for me, because I was fortunate enough to be picked up by Step Studios, who actually was approached by Red Bull to do some sort of a production that would enhance women riding. I got picked to be the poster child, or should I say the poster old lady or the poster elder? I don't know where I fit in that, you know, but for whatever it was worth, you know, even when they approached me, the first thing I said was, you know, this is very flattering and I want to tell the story. I said, but in all honesty, I can't take the accolades for the Litas. Jessica Haggett is the one that founded the Litas. So they approached Jessica, and Jessica, being the amazing human being that she is, she's like, no, I really want Gevin to be the poster child. She says, because Gevin has been in the industry for over 50 years. And she says she knows the industry knows her. She has walked the walk and talked the talk for over 50 years. And we really want somebody that represents all women, not just a small, you know, portion of them. And she says, we represent a very young community. And she says, and you represent all of it, from the older to the mid-range to the younger, because you inspired many of us. Like Jessica's parents probably would have been people that I would have inspired from the Biker Women movie. Yeah. You know, because that's what happened basically after the Biker Women movie went global. There were all these women that went out and bought motorcycles. Well, those women, most of them were either divorced or newly married. And then once their kids were fairly grown, they decided, oh, you know what, I'm going to go get a motorcycle. Or even after their kids were gone and out of the house, oh, I'm going to go get a motorcycle. And then their younger daughters generally we're like, oh my gosh, my mom, she's having a midlife crisis, but wow, that really is cool that she's riding a motorcycle. I think I want to try that. And here we are with 15 or more thousand women simply in the Litas alone, and with about almost more than 25% of the market of motorcycles purchased now, and actually in the United States. I don't know what the global numbers are on that, but they are rising with astronomical success. I mean, it's a movement. It's an absolute movement.
What I love about this is, was it 97 when the movie came out?
We actually shot it in 95 and it was released in 96.
96,
Yes,
okay.
96.
So, right, so we're talking 25 years ago that this movie came out about biker women.
Correct.
And featuring you.
Yes.
Right. And I love how movements are started, because you never know what your contribution is going to turn out to be. I don't think any of us really know how we impact the world, really. But here you are, having been a part of sparking a movement by being featured in this film that gave so many women around this country and beyond permission to say, I want to try that. Oh,
exactly.
if Gevin can do it, I'm going to try that. Right. I'm curious. I have a couple questions about it, but one is like, what's your reflection on movement making? Because you've been a part of, there were not a lot of women riding when you came up through the ranks. And I remember
not at all
reading something where you said, you go to motorcycle ralies and the women are usually in the back of some dude's bike, right? Not riding their own.
90%, almost 90, almost 95%, especially when I went to Sturgis, South Dakota.
Yeah.
Where that's the biggest motorcycle rally in the world.
Yeah.
And the first time I went there was 1990. And I was the only woman that I saw on a motorcycle, probably for the first 5 or 6 days, and certainly the only African-American that I saw there the entire time I was there.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how that changed exponentially over the years, because I actually have been to Sturgis every year now, with probably about 3 exceptions. Obviously, last year, COVID was one of those exceptions. Yeah. And then a couple of other times besides that. But I have gone every year because it's become a family for me. But truthfully, I've watched this incredible transition from no women to now, even here in California, for every 10 guys, I'll see 4 women riding. Or now I'm seeing more women riding than I do guys, which is really blowing me away, because of the fact that we are beginning to buy so many motorcycles, because women are feeling, I think, empowered by mastering this piece of metal.
What do you think motorcycles do for the women that you see, riding? What do you see happen for them?
That's a great question. For me, watching them, especially if I'm demonstrative in having a part in teaching them or influencing them, is this untapped excitement. It's almost like being unchained, excuse me. It is, I have to put it like that. It's almost like an emancipation, or almost like having chains cut from your arms and legs, and now you can fly. Because what I see is their eagerness, but shyness and apprehension because of what they've been told they cannot do. And when they have an opportunity to see another woman that is of small frame, be able to master, a motorcycle, say this size.
It's a big bike.
It's a big bike. I'm rolling around on an 800-pound motorcycle. And when they see the success of that, I think it changes them, because that makes it possible. This is no different than how I was when I was 11 years old, 11 or 12, I think, when I first saw an African-American woman blow by me while I was standing on the corner, and she blew by me on a 750 Ducati. And that is what made it real for me. Not because I just saw, like a Caucasian girl, because even that wouldn't have been real for me, because at that time of my life, I never, or rarely, in fact, I have to honestly say, I never saw anyone that looked anything like me or was doing anything like what I'm doing now. And even to this day, there still isn't like a superhero out there that does anything like what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Not one thing, which brings me to my hope and desire of hopefully getting either a series, a superhero, some kind of series. I'll be the old lady that, I mean, I don't care. Just I want to be a part of something like that, whether it's a docu-series, whether it's a fun action hero series, and another thing, oh, you're too old. It's like, well, I've been told that all my life. Even when I did Biker Women, oh, you're too old. I was 38 years old when I did Biker Women, and I did it anyway. It was like, oh, you're too old. You guys are all too old because you're not in your 20s. It's like, well, it's not about being in your 20s. It's about having experience and depth. And we all, the other women that I did this show with, we all had depth and experience. And thank the Lord we were, and all that is good that we were finally given a platform to show what we were capable of. And the fact that we too could get out there just like the guys and ride these big bikes without an issue. And we camped all the way across, I mean, it was a phenomenal experience. I mean, and I had been camping and going to Sturgis 5 years prior to even filming with this crew, but it's possible. And we needed to see more of each other.
I love that. I don't know if you're familiar with Gabby Rivera. She wrote for Marvel Comics, the America Chavez, the portal punching kind of queer Latina superhero, right? So somebody listening needs to get Gevin and Gabby together.
Absolutely.
I want to dive into, you said something about what I see the motorcycle doing for women is allowing them to drop these chains, right? That it's about emancipation. One of the things that I look at is how our life's history, our wounds, our struggles put an imprint on us, right?
Yes.
And puts us on a particular path.
Absolutely.
That, oftentimes in the first half of life is where our struggles live, but in the second half of life become the place where we show up and serve from, right? So I'm curious if you look at your history, and I don't know if maybe this was the move from California to Ohio or something else, but where did that, or just being African-American or female and African-American, or being a tomboy, quote unquote,
or being a lesbian,
or fill in the blank, right? Like, okay, check. What were your chains?
Wow. I had a lot of them. Growing up, I felt I was the ugly duckling, simply because I was the only African-American girl in my schools for years. I mean, my parents struggled to keep me in private school, which was really expensive and very difficult for a lower middle class couple to maintain. That was actually what prompted our move to Ohio, was the fact that my parents could no longer keep us in good schools, here in Los Angeles. And so they both put their heads together, really didn't want to move from LA to a more rural state, but they knew that they didn't want their children in a city public school, especially after I went to 1 year of public school after being in parochial school. And that was that was something in itself. I mean, that's a story, that's a movie in itself, but I think that piece there was one of the things that was, a chain for me. Having the skin color was certainly a chain. Having the hair that I had at the time was certainly a chain. Having protruding, a protruding overbite was certainly a chain. Being a female was a chain. Being a lower middle class, because all of the kids that I went to school with were far more wealthy than I was. I mean, we had no generational wealth for obvious reasons because of systemic racism. I mean, it was everything that my father could do to get us in a good area. And fortunately, because my mother was educated and was very fair complected, my mother could nearly pass for white, although she did not. But because of those things, we were allowed certain amenities, which is a bit of a crime, but it worked, and my mother, especially because she had a college education, she was always making sure that our vocabulary was impeccable, because she said they will judge you by the way you speak and carry yourself. So, you know, these challenges were something that we were very well aware of. I mean, from pretty much coming right out of the womb, my parents groomed us to be prepared for the world in that sense, so that we could strive and we could thrive, which was very difficult, especially in the early 50s, 60s, and 70s, and on to the 80s. You know, I had several struggles. I mean, I had, at one point I had to fight for my civil rights, you know, and I had to sue a company that I was doing corporate work for. And eventually I actually won my suit and was given my pay retroactive. And, you know, I mean, but I've had many, many battles. I mean, I could talk about whether I'm, you know, being lesbian, being African-American, having kinky hair, not being white, a white girl, and not having any dates. I mean, I'm sure there's a part of me that wonders if I had had the opportunity to be hit upon by boys, because I wasn't even hit on until I got into college, you know? So naturally I drifted more towards women, because women were surrounding me all the time, because I was a girl and I wasn't having any play from any boys. And I ended up delving into the lesbian world as opposed to a heterosexual world because of that, you know. I mean, and I don't dislike men, you know, and I would, if I weren't happily married, I would certainly consider dating a man, although I prefer women, but I digress.
Let me ask you this. Here's what strikes me about you. There's a resiliency to your spirit that I think is uncommon. And from everything I'm hearing, like, I think we could contribute much of that to your parents, because Lord knows the other circumstances in your life were not stacked up in your favor.
Correct.
Right? I'm curious, and when I think about our wounding, I think a lot about the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, right? Yes. I'm an ugly duckling. I'm curious what, and I'm going to go here someplace in just a minute as it relates to the bike. But before we get to the bike, I'm curious if you can, like, turn back time a little bit and go, what were some of the stories I used to tell myself about myself?
Yes, there were a lot. There were a lot, actually. The ugly duckling piece definitely hovered over my life more than anything, I think, because I never saw anyone that looked like me in the media, well, in anything for that matter, newspaper articles, magazines. I never saw a reflection of me. So naturally, I thought, well, I must be undesirable. And in thinking that, I did battle a bit of depression as a child, you know, and I remember talking to my father about it. You know, I was close to my mother as well, you know, but my dad and I would talk sometimes, and, you know, because he was the one that would always, like, push me to, you know, be positive. You got to think positive. You got to think positive. And I was like, but Dad, you know, I mean, this is really hard, you know. And I remember him saying to me one time, he goes, there's a saying that the laugh and the world laughs with you, cry and you cry alone. And he said, if you make your own party, people will come to your party because you make it fun. He says, but if you're over there crying in your beer or crying in your soup, he says, nobody's going to want to be around you, because that's a bummer. That's a downer. Nobody wants to be around somebody that's sad. You know, they want to be where the party's at. And so that clicked for me. That clicked. And he said, keep a smile on your face. Make sure that wherever you are, if you're not in the in circle, you make your own circle. And all of a sudden, you know, when I started doing that, people were migrating from the in circle into my circle because I was inviting and I made it fun. And I'd be, you know, I'd laugh and we'd be joking, and I made people feel safe. And that's what I worked at doing, was creating a safe environment. And it didn't matter whether you were white, black, racist, not racist, you know, it didn't matter. I mean, because especially when I moved to Ohio, you know, here I was, an African-American lesbian, didn't really know it when I moved to Ohio. I kind of knew it, but I wasn't sure what it was. But coming to Ohio, where everybody's a little bit not as progressive.
I grew up in Michigan.
Okay. Yeah. You know, I mean, and I certainly, I met the most wonderful people in Ohio, Michigan, you know, Kentucky, you know, and strangely enough, it became the dichotomy of my personality. I mean, I learned bluegrass. I played more guitar, but I wasn't playing blues or as much folk. because I learned folk when I was in California, simply because I was surrounded by all white people. But when I got to, Ohio, now I'm learning bluegrass because I'm in the Appalachian Mountains, and a little bit of blues, but I was still surrounded by predominantly Caucasian people. So I learned to play banjo, I learned to play guitar, I learned to dabble with, all these like spoons and, all this really crazy fun stuff. But I was exposed to a very prejudiced world that I had to learn to diffuse the fear that they had when they saw my Black face. Yes. Because that was the first thing they saw, whether they knew I was a lesbian or not. So I had to go into every room like a happy puppy, hey, how you doing? And I'd catch people off guard. I have got stories that can I share a quick story? And make
sure,
it
share
short?
A quick story. Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
When I was living in Ohio, and this was before I had my first Harley, this is an Indian, but I have 3 Harleys and then this, but I went into, there was a particular bar that I wanted to go in, and I was in my 20s, and I was riding a Honda at the time, and I would pass this bar, and it had all these cool bikes, and I'm like, I want to go into that bar, and I was like over 18, and my friends were like, no, you can't go into that bar, it's a biker bar, they'll burn your bike, and they were probably all racist in there, and I'm like, whatever, but, and I was like, finally, I decided to go in. So I did. I go into this bar. It was nighttime. I roll up. I park my Honda next to all the Harleys. I walk in and I'm like, hey, to the bartender. And the bartender's like, hey, I'm not sure what they're thinking about me. And I go straight to the pool table because I was an avid pool player. So I start playing pool and I'm not paying any attention to what's going on. And we're playing. I'm getting all engrossed. I'm learning people's names. They're learning mine. We're having a great time playing pool. And it's wintertime, but it's not snowing. Okay, so it's just cold. It's probably about 30 degrees outside, but no snow. That's where, we ride in the cold.
Yep.
And so then they kept shutting the door or opening the door. And I'd go over and I'd shut the door and I'd go right back to my pool game. Well, this happened like 5 times. And I'm like, finally, why do you guys keep, opening the door? It's cold in here. Shut the door. I shut the door for like the 4th time. And then I stopped and I looked at what was on the back of the door. And I'm looking at it and they're looking at me and I'm looking at them and I'm looking at it. And what it was a full-size target on the back of the door with the silhouette of a Black man with a fro running. And they didn't want me to see that. And yeah. I'm looking at it and they're looking at me wondering, oh my God, is, all hell going to break loose now or whatever. And I'm looking at it and I'm looking at them and they're looking at me. And finally I went, I am so glad I am not a Black man. And they all fell out. The whole bar fell out, and that bar became my bar after that. And no one ever treated me badly. I always got the red carpet rolled out anytime I was there. That was always, I never had to pay for a drink. I never had to pay for my pool games. And that became my bar for like the next 7 years. That was where that's where I would hang out. And strangely enough, I'm not a drinker. I'll have a wine occasionally. I'm such an occasional drinker, but I would drink water. And they would be like, what are you drinking? I'm like, I'm drinking the strongest thing in the house. And they'd look and they go, what are you drinking? Straight vodka? I'm like, no, I'm drinking the strongest thing in the house. They go, what's that? I go, water. So there's no one that's got balls in here to drink this shit.
Yeah.
And we would laugh, but it is what it is.
Here's what I keep hearing, Gevin. Your dad's instruction to you. Hey, if you aren't part of the crowd, make your own crowd.
Make your own crowd.
And that you've done that your whole life. And I think how you've done it is you play.
Yes, I do.
Right? You play, whether it's riding a bike, whether it's playing pool, whatever it is, you start a party, you play. Yes. And guess what? We like to play. People like to play. And you keep inviting people into it. All right. Yes. I want to ask you a few more questions before we run out of time here. When I think about bikers, about biker groups, right? Biker gangs, whatever we want to call them. I think a lot about belonging and having places of belonging.
Yes.
I'm curious after all these years of, having started being a biker without the Litas, without a females bikers group, without a place where you really necessarily belonged, right? You created your own belonging.
Yes.
What do you think makes the Litas work? Like, what have you learned about belonging by being a part of the Litas?
It comes down to community. It really does. It comes down to community, because no matter where you are, if you have common ground, it changes everything. So we have the motorcycle community, and we encompass the population. I mean, there's one of each in all of it, so we have a community that houses short people, light people, dark people, fat people, gay people, straight people, people from other countries. It doesn't matter. It services all of us, and it gives us one common ground. It gives us one thing that we can all talk about, no matter how much we might hate that person or not like, I don't like short people, or I don't like tall people, or whatever. But if you all ride motorcycles, it's like, oh, well, that person over there is on a Dynaglide. I kind of like that. Oh, that person over there is on a Triumph. I really like that. They're a bike rider. That's really cool. It changes it. And I think that it makes us a global community because we're all different.
Yeah.
We're all different. We all come from different walks of life. We all come from different countries. We all come from different nationalities. We all come from different races. We're a community of motorcyclists. And no matter where you go, actually, I was approached to do a show called Shop Talk, and they invited me to do it. It was called Bikers and Discrimination. Oh no, Bikers and Racism, the Difficult Discussion. And it was like, I didn't know that's what it was. And they said, "Oh, we want to do a show." I'm like, "Sure." And it was it's on bike. And I was like, "Oh," So, but I got a chance to talk about that on a really wonderful platform, and because of the fact that my entire family is such a melting pot. I mean, my aunt is Irish, my uncle is Polish, my other aunt is Latin. It's like I can't talk badly about anybody because we've got Native American, French, Irish, Latin, Scottish. I mean, we're everyone.
Yeah.
We're everyone. So I just had to make sure that my very slippery slope didn't step on anybody's toes. And I said, what we're dealing with here is fear. I said, we've got people that are afraid of losing what they have or fear of what they think they're afraid of. And what we need to do as human beings for each other is diffuse that fear in whatever way we can do that.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
It's a great
it's
lesson.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Just a couple more questions. I was, again, thinking about you and the biker community and belonging. And I would love to hear your perspective around this. Like, what part of belonging do you feel like is finding your people and your place? And what part of belonging in your own journey or in what you see for others is an inside job?
Wow. That's a loaded question. That's a loaded question. I remember really wanting to be a part of a lot of organizations like, because I don't want to single anybody out, but I just remember wanting to be a part of a lot of different organizations, and I was excluded because of being African American, or I was excluded because I was a lesbian, or I was excluded because I was a female, or I was excluded because I wasn't pretty enough, or I was, so there's always those exclusions. Let's get back down to the nuts and bolts of your question. Would you repeat it, please?
Yeah. Basically, there is the part of belonging, I think, that is finding your place, finding your people, right? Finding your community, especially for those of us who grew up or via circumstance, like we didn't naturally fit in. So we had to find it. I used to live in San Francisco, and I grew up as a gay kid in an evangelical house in the Midwest, right? And I used to talk about San Francisco as a city of refugees.
Yes.
Like, hey, if you don't fit anywhere else, you can come here.
That's right.
And
land of broken toys.
It really, it was that. And I was a broken toy when I moved there. I really feel like I moved there to heal.
That's how I felt too.
Yeah. I moved to Los Angeles in retrospect to lead. But I was in San Francisco to heal. So there is the part of belonging that I think is finding your people, your chosen family is, we often call it in the queer community.
Yes.
But I think there's another part of belonging that is an inside job, right? Learning to belong to yourself, learning to find the parts in you that like, ooh, that's tough to look at, and see if you can welcome
Yes.
that bit back home. I'm
Yes.
curious, like, there's so much othering in your biography, right? Again, the kinky hair, African American, lesbian, female, biker, take your pick, right? Line them up. I'm curious what your journey has been like. Like, what are some of the things you've had to look at to really come home to yourself so that you can really be a leader in this community that you help foster?
Thank you. That's actually a really great question. I'm just going to start with the most obvious. I had to learn to accept the fact that I was African American.
Hmm.
I had to learn to accept the fact that my hair was kinky, and I had to find a way that I could accept it. And because in all honesty, it's the funniest thing, because I really got ostracized quite a bit by my own ethnicities. You know, I mean, it was like I was picked on quite a bit by African American girls because of the way I spoke.
Yeah.
And strangely enough, that went on all the way up into my 30s, into early 40s. But when it changed was when I decided to start locking my hair, dreadlocking my hair. Strangely enough, that was a pivotal moment for me when I got to really kind of grow into myself and find where I'm comfortable. You know, because, you know, in eighth grade, you have all those awkward years. You know, well, my awkward years went well into my 30s, you know, like looking at myself going, oh, I don't like the way that looks. You know, but with the idea of accepting the fact that I was African American, that was never going to change. And how do I make that appealing to other people? And so when I started locking my hair and having dreadlocks, I all of a sudden, out of the blue, became very accepted by the African American community, even though I speak the way I do. And I couldn't understand what that was about. Finally, one of my African American sisters broke it down for me. She's like, girl, she's like, you don't get it. I said, I'm not, I really don't. I don't understand, you know, because in all honesty, I was assimilated into a very white world.
Yeah.
And so I lost a lot of my African American roots. And I share that with my African American sisters. I'm like, look, I'm just me. You know, I mean, I like rock and roll because that's what I was raised on. It's not because I don't like Black people, you know, or myself. It's just what I know, you know. But I said what I learned from one of my sisters was, she said, the girls can't pick on you anymore because you're more Black than they are. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she says, you decided to go all natural. You don't have a fro, but you decided to lock your hair. Mm-hmm. So your hair is natural. It's like, I don't process my hair so that it's nice and straight and long, and I don't have a weave, and I just went natural, just with how my hair is naturally. Yeah. And she says, that's the reason why they don't pick on you anymore, because they know that the minute they try to tell you that you're white, you can turn that right back around on them and go, well, wait a minute, that ain't your hair. You got a weave, girl. Uh-huh. You know? Or you just got that hair processed because I can just sprinkle some water on you, and you know that's gonna go right back home. You know, so we would joke about that. And so that's how I gained common ground with my Black sisters, you know, because we'll joke about stuff like that. You know, they'll say, girl, you need to just come on back home for a little while. We'll just joke around. You know, it's like, well, do you still have your rhythm? You know, I'm like, yeah, girl, I still got my rhythm.
I love it.
But it is what it is, you know, and it comes down to accepting who I am as African American, but actually also accepting the assimilation into a white world that I am as well, and not feeling bad about that, because I almost felt bad about that. It was like, what, do I need to dumb myself down now? And no, I don't. I need to continue to educate, and I need to continue to expose who I am to other African American girls that are probably struggling with the very same thing. Yeah. You know. But it takes courage to do that. And I got beaten down. I can't even tell you how many times. I mean, I remember one time when a group of Black girls wanted to beat me up, you know, and I told my dad, I said, these girls are following me home. And he said, here's what you do. You warn them. And I said, warn them? What do you mean? He says, you warn them. He says, you tell them, okay, there's 5 of you and 1 of me, and you're probably going to beat me up, but one of you is going to remember my name. You know why? Because one of you is not going to have an arm. One of you is probably not going to have an ear. One of you is probably not going to have an eye. one of you might have a couple teeth knocked out that are going to have to be replaced or not. And that's going to have my name on it. So I'm ready to rumble if you want to rumble. And strangely enough, that won me over because it's like, look, if I have to fight, I will fight, and I will fight to the death. But somebody will remember my name.
Well,
and that pretty much goes throughout my life. You know?
It does.
Somebody's going to remember my name.
You know, oh, why are you the one featured in that movie? Well, somebody's going to remember my name.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, here's the thing that I want to point out for everybody listening that you just say over and over and over in different ways, which is that you have trained yourself to find common ground.
Absolutely.
Wherever you are, if you're in a biker bar in Ohio, you know, with
sitting down with the president of the United States, no matter who he is, I could find common ground with Mr. Trump. You know,
yep.
We would be laughing at the table together. So,
and that's the thing. That's the, you know, one of the ways you keep finding it is where's the humor? How are we going to find common ground? Where can we laugh together?
Right.
And if we can laugh together, we can be together and not fear each other. And then we can grow together potentially.
And then we can grow together, because without that, you cannot grow. And that is my life's goal, is to educate. You know, if I see a teachable moment, like for instance, with the black man, you know, the silhouette of the black man on the target, that was a teachable moment for me, you know, and because I was blessed with a degree in education and then later with the master's, I mean, it has served me well. And then of course, when I was growing up, I did all the Dale Carnegie classes, which are now like Tony Robbins. Yeah. Tony Robbins. Yeah. I was almost said Tony Robbins. Like, wait, that doesn't sound right. But it does come down to that. You know, it comes down to learning how you can find the common ground, diffuse the fear, and be able to implement teachable moments where people do not feel threatened, because it is a threatening place out there.
Yeah. Yeah. God, that is such a lesson we can all learn right now.
Yeah. Truly.
So tell me, Gevin, what's next for you? You shared just a little bit before we started about what you're doing right now in terms of communities, especially female biker communities around the world. Like, what's next? Where are you going? What's the big mission you're up to now?
Again, you know, I'm really working towards going global. I want to be a representative for women all over the world. And basically introduce them into the women's sports activities, but getting them a platform at the same time. Because even when I talk to photographers, whenever you photograph women, traditionally these guys will be like, "Oh, she looks really pretty on that bike. Let's photograph her now. Well, she looks really sick." You got to forget all that. I mean, I want the grungy photos when we're like down and dirty, and you know, we might have the ugly face on because we're making this corner and we got the dirt in our face and our hair's flying. They give that to men because they make men look like superheroes. What they forget is that we are superheroes as well, but we're never depicted as that. We're depicted as people that need to be victims or need to be rescued, or we need to be pretty and we need to, oh, well, she looks nice. And certainly not disrespecting any of the women that are absolutely beautiful out there. I think every woman is beautiful out there, but we need to be able to get them to see us. To see the fact that we have potential to do the very same things that they do. We have desires to do the very same things that they do. We have a desire to want to be seen in a motorcycle racing situation or a snowmobile racing situation, and not just as a female. We want to be seen as a contender, you know, and we want that opportunity to have the platform to speak about that, whether it's technology or whether it's about the product, or whether it's just about the enthusiasm of the sport, you know. But for me, I really want to share with the world, to other women, that you can do this. You just have to be courageous enough to take the first step. You've got to live your dare. You've got to live your dare.
Live your dare.
Live your dare.
Beautiful. Gevin, where can we find out more about you and live our dare with you?
Well, I just got inducted into the Polaris Incorporated Women in Power Sports Council. So you can find me working with Polaris. You can also find me through Harley Davidson, because I'm also working with Harley Davidson, because I'm kind of one of the females that promotes large bagger bikes. But but pretty much in the motorcycling community, on Instagram as Sapasiou, Sapasioux. I'm also a leather craftswoman, and I have a line, so I'm on Gevintage 57, and that's Gevin Tage, like almost like vintage and Gevin together with 57 on the end of it. And then I'm also working on taking excursions to my cabin that my wife and I own up in Pine Mountain Club. So I'm looking at doing excursion trips for Lakota Cabin, and that's at Lakota Cabin on Instagram as well. So you can pretty much find me anywhere. If you look up GevinFax.com, you can find me, and it'll give you all that other stuff.
Awesome.
And also A Quest Called Tribe. I don't want to forget my sisters. A Quest Called Tribe is another project that I'm working on right now that is very dear to my heart, because we are right now working on hopefully a docuseries to find today's revolutionaries, people that are building wells in Africa, people that are getting water to places that there is no water, or light to places there is no light. And, you know, whether it's charities for abused women or sex trafficking, anything that we can get into where we can find these people that are today's revolutionaries that are working towards changing the world.
Awesome.
So A Quest Called Tribe.
Beautiful. And I think the Litas is the Litas.co.
Yes, that's correct. The Litas.co.
Beautiful.
And there's also Ride Wild. There's also Dream Roll. There's also Babes Ride Out. I mean, honestly, these are the top contenders in the motorcycle community.
Awesome. Gevin, you're such an inspiration, and you're such a delight. Thank you for spending time with us today. Thank you for daring us, you know, and thanks for teaching us about finding common ground. Man, if we can dare and find common ground, those two things together, talk about the chains dropping, talk about our collective emancipation. So thank you. This has been a real delight. I really appreciate you being here. Hey there, thanks so much for listening in. If this conversation was powerful, if it stirred your soul or inspired your journey, then be sure to share it with a friend. Just copy and paste the link wherever you're listening to this podcast and text that link right now to a friend that you think would be inspired by this episode. And if this is your first time here, be sure to click that subscribe button over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and I'd really appreciate it if you'd leave a rating and review so I can get to know you and your thoughts better. To learn more about the work I do with emerging and established paradigm changers, go to thecourageousmessenger.com. That's all for today. Thanks so much for being here, and I hope to see you in the next episode.